Valtteri Bottas made one of the biggest driver moves for 2022 after he lost his seat at Mercedes and moved to Alfa Romeo. His role in the Alfa Romeo team is very different to the one that he had at Mercedes, and he's made an immediate impact in the early part of the new season and has proven his ability once again. So how has Bottas reinvented himself in Formula 1 in 2022? Let's have a look. My name's Andy and this is Behind the Drive. A series of single-year deals. Bottas opted to leave Mercedes on the basis that he wasn't able to be offered a multi-year deal with the world champions. He had received single-year contracts throughout his 5 years with Mercedes, and in that time he always supported the team from a Constructors' Championship perspective, while tending to struggle when compared to Lewis Hamilton in that team. This meant he was often labelled as the number 2 driver, and whilst he was rarely asked to concede position by the team in the first couple of races of a given season, he would rarely assert himself in those early stages and would subsequently be asked to let his teammate by if there was any chance to give Hamilton a better shot at achieving more World Championship points. In 2021, this happened fairly early on in the season at the Spanish Grand Prix. In just the 4th race of the year, it was already clear that Verstappen and Hamilton would be in a close battle for the World Championship, and as such, when Hamilton was put on a counter strategy with an additional pit stop, he came out behind his teammate, but on fresh rubber and ready to hunt down the leading Red Bull driver. In this instance, Bottas was never going to be able to defend from Hamilton given the different strategies, but even so, he was asked to not hold his teammate up, given it was deemed critical for the championship battle that Hamilton would be able to get the win over Verstappen. There was no doubt that Bottas was the unofficial number 2 driver at Mercedes, and this is probably one of the factors that drove Bottas away from that team. During his Mercedes career, the 1-year deals left Bottas without a clear view of his future in the sport, and there was a period of time every year where there would be relentless speculation about his future. And I certainly added to this in 2021. After 5 seasons, it's understandable that he would want to move away from that annual cycle, and with Mercedes not willing to offer him that multi-year deal and preferring to opt for George Russell as they look to their future. As I said in that video last year, Valtteri Bottas hadn't done anything wrong in that Mercedes seat. Over his 5 years in that driver lineup, the team won 5 Constructors' Championships, and this meant that he was one of the strongest number 2 drivers out there, as he ensured Mercedes remained the top team in the sport during his tenure. And during that time, Bottas achieved his 10 race victories, 20 pole positions, and got his Mercedes car into Q3 in every single race that he competed in with Mercedes. So arguably it was harsh to drop the Finnish driver, but Mercedes were in a tough spot and at risk of losing their future talent to other teams that were reportedly interested. Bottas' departure from Mercedes was therefore inevitable, and the fact that he was unhappy with his contractual situation meant he left with an element of control and knowledge that the team would never be willing to offer him the kind of deal that he was looking for. So he went looking for a replacement and for a team that would be able to offer him the level of long-term security he desired. But before we look in the reinvention of Valtteri Bottas, I want to take a moment to ask you to consider subscribing to Behind the Drive. I'm aiming for 50,000 subscribers by the summer break, so if you haven't already done so, it would be great if you could subscribe. Thanks. The reinvention of Valtteri Bottas. So, having been a second driver for 5 seasons, it was time for Valtteri Bottas to move to Alfa Romeo, and he was placed into the lead driver role as he was partnered with the rookie, Zhou Guanyu. This was a role he'd taken on before, during his time at Williams, although there he spent most of his years partnered with a more experienced driver in Felipe Massa. Bottas was a great driver for Williams, and it was his consistent performances beating his teammates that got him into that Mercedes drive in the first place. Stepping into the Alfa Romeo team lead role was probably something that Bottas was comfortable with, and early on in the season, both he and the team have hit the ground running in the races after what looked like a difficult start in the Barcelona test, as the team struggled to manage their porpoising. In Bahrain, Bottas looked like he was back in a Mercedes car with 6th in qualifying, as he lined up on the grid alongside his former teammate, Lewis Hamilton. It was a continuation of his strong qualifying form, and set him up for a great start to the year at the front of the midfield. In the end, that qualifying performance was converted into 6th at the finish, although the race itself didn't go as smoothly as that makes it look. With wheel spin off the line, Bottas dropped to 14th place on the opening lap, and he damaged his rear tyres in the process, leaving him vulnerable for the first stint. Without the 3 retirements from Gasly, Verstappen and Perez, that could have left him in 9th position rather than 6th. So yes, there was an element of luck in there for the Finnish driver, but either way, it was a strong recovery drive to ensure he was able to get back into a great points finishing position. Had he not had the trouble at the getaway, who knows where he could have finished. What this recovery drive displayed was Bottas's ability to overtake others. This is something that he typically struggled with at Mercedes, which was largely attributed to the fact that the Mercedes car was never designed to follow others, with it instead being expected to be leading races from the front. But regardless, whenever he dropped back, he always found it difficult to get back towards the front. There were signs of this changing in 2021, with his back of the grid to 3rd at the finish performance in Monza standing out as one of those results that showed his improvements. But perhaps a new level of confidence at a new team, combined with the new regulations which are designed to make following cars much easier, has put Bottas in a much stronger position when it comes to racecraft. In Saudi Arabia, Bottas put another good qualifying performance together, getting into the top 10, but after a better getaway he retired from the race with rising engine temperatures, with the team wanting to save the engine rather than risk running it to the end of the race. At the time, he was on for another good point-scoring finish, and was at the front of the midfield pack, competing with the Alpine drivers early on in the race. This suggests that the Alfa Romeo car was strong at different types of circuits, and that Bottas was comfortable getting the maximum from his car. One of the reasons for this could be the fact that Alfa Romeo are reportedly the only team that have been able to get down to the minimum weight limit for 2022. According to GP Blog, whilst many teams are removing paint from their cars in effort to save the grams, the Alfa Romeo team have had to add ballast to their car to get it up to the weight limit. The 2022 cars are already significantly heavier than previous ones, which makes them less agile, particularly on higher fuel loads. So with Alfa Romeo having an apparent advantage in this department, they're likely to be more competitive, which may well make it easier for Bottas to compete with others on track. So far this season, Bottas has been well ahead of his rookie teammate, Zhou Guanyu, and this is to be expected. A driver in his 10th year in the sport should be comfortably beating a rookie. But what has impressed me the most from Bottas this year when it comes to his teammate is that they appear to have a really good relationship already. From the limited information that I have, you can see Bottas supporting his teammate on social media, taking the time to appreciate his efforts and performances on track. It'll be tough for Bottas to maintain this form as other teams develop around them and also reduce their weight to the minimum limit. In Australia, Bottas missed out on Q3 for the first time in 103 races, but he did go from 12th to 8th in the race. So far, it's been Bottas leading the way in the Alfa Romeos, and I expect that to continue. But if he's showing that he can not only lead the team on track, but also support his younger and less experienced teammate, I think we could see Bottas finding a longer-term place for him in the sport. What does Bottas need to achieve to call 2022 a success? Bottas has got off to a great start with Alfa Romeo, but there's still a long way to go in the 2022 season. Realistically, I think to have scored 12 points in 3 races, Bottas will already call this season a success, particularly when compared to where many people expected Alfa Romeo to be. A podium could well be on the cards for Bottas this season if he's able to keep up these kind of performances and the team is able to continue to develop that car. The long season represents the biggest challenge for Formula 1 teams, with limits on development times and spending limits also. It means they're all having to develop conservatively, and this will probably mean some teams will get it right and some teams will get it wrong. To maintain their pace in the midfield, Alfa Romeo will need to be one of the teams to get it right, and with the financial backing from Zhou, they may well be better placed to improve than in previous seasons. With Bottas showing his ability to act as a mentor to younger drivers, I think Alfa Romeo will be even more likely to keep him to race alongside the young Sauberback driver Théo Pourchaire for 2023. The young French driver might be ready for Formula 1 next year, and being partnered with a good mentor could well give him the best opportunity to get up to speed quickly. So already, this early into the 2022 season, I believe Bottas has reinvented himself in Formula 1 and proven once again why he was deserving of his Mercedes seat in the first place. If things continue as they are now, Bottas will undoubtedly be able to call 2022 a success and build on that for the future seasons. To learn more about another driver that reinvented himself in F1, I recommend you watch this video next.